Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Mirza and now I will be presenting on the feminization of environmentalist movement, focusing on Judi Bari. Judi Bari is an American environmentalist and a labor leader and also a feminist. And she was also a prominent member of the Earth First, a radical environmental activist group which advocates for the conservation of the environment and the wilderness originating from the Southwest America. And through this presentation, I would like to focus on how actually Barry shine an alternate light on a radical environmentalism by adding the feminist perspective into this radical environmental advocacy group, which is Earth First. And then I will explore how Barry unifies the timber workers and the environmentalists through the movement of Redwood Summer, which ultimately are bringing a green perspective to a labor union. And then, in the end of the presentation, I will also explore how Judy Barry has always faced a series of oppression from the government and the public, which leading to an assassination attempt on her and her fellow activists in Oakland. Barry shine an alternate light in this particular environmental group, which is the Earth First. Earth First originally adopted the philosophy of a deep ecology, which is based on the belief that humans should radically transform their relationship to nature from the one that receives nature only for its profit to one that values nature as essential. In other words, the earth is not just here for a human consumption. Nevertheless, despite their very radical environmentalism, early patriarchal leadership of the Earthers was still engulfed in misogynism. There were plenty of competent women that were not credited by the Earthers founders, and Judy Barry was one of them. And as Barry primarily involved in the Ecotopia Earth First, which is the Northern Californian branch of this environmentalist group, her articles for the Earth First journal were heavily edited by the editors to the point that it was unrecognizable. And ultimately, in the 1991, they ultimately removed the Ecotopia Earth First section from their journal. And as you can see in this presentation, this is a standalone Ecotopia Earth First because they actually has denounced Earth First advocacy for tree spiking, and then bunch of the early members of the Earth First actually um has actually responded with a very misogynist response towards Barry article. He labeled Barry's writing as a scrumptious piece of idiocy, and this was explained by the scholars that the early Earth First founders viewed themselves as a rednecks of the wilderness, as a big man goes into the big wilderness to save the big trees. As you can see, these cartoons are depictions of ideal male and female radical environmentalists, and these cartoons were drawn by early Earth First founders. And this particular cartoon received uh, criticism from Judy Barry herself, which demonstrates the underlying sexism, which is very prevalent in the movement. Next, the alliance between the international workers of the world and the Earth First has sparked the movement of the Redwood Summer, and this union initiated the movement to fight against the timber companies' logging frenzy in the summer of 1990. And this environmental battle was triggered by the rapid job loss of the timber workers and the rise of clear cutting by the big timber companies. And this conflict was initially caused by the November environmental ballot in California, which known as the Proposition of 130 or the Forest Forever Initiative. And in this movement, Barry and other members would dress in a spotted owl costume, and they will spend weeks binding themselves to the redwoods and demanding the loggers to stop clear cutting the woods. And they will eventually plan this 3 month movement to train the locals in mastering the eco defense, which comprising of tree hugging, tree sitting, and tree picketing. And as the movement of the Redwood Summer were getting endless support across the nation, the violence against the organizers were also escalated, and Judy Barry has begun to receive a series of increasingly frightening written death threats. And even when she tried to report these anonymous death wish to the local police, they only replied to her, "You brought it upon yourself, Barry." So Barry was almost killed by a pipe bomb planted beneath her car seat when Barry was on her way through Oakland to prepare for a Redwood Summer charity concert. And this incident also wounded her fellow activist, which is Darry Cherney, and leaving Barry with a shattered pelvis and a permanently disabled. And according to the locals, the FBI and local law enforcement put Miss Barry and Mr. Cherney under arrest, saying that they suspected them to had built the bomb, and it doesn't make sense. And 2 months later, and the charge of the bombing on both of them um, were dropped by the authorities. And after the bombing, it was a bunch of women who actually rose to take her place. Um, it worth mentioning that the movement of Redwood Summer is actually the point of feminization of the earth first. I will end this presentation with a quote from Judy Barry herself. It is the hatred of the feminine, which is the hatred of life, that has helped bring about the destruction of the planet, and it is the strength of women that can restore the balance we need to survive. So, with that, thank you.